Welcome to the Arclight Battery, your power source for all things Warcraft Arclight Rumble related. In today's video, we'll be going over the Horde family, and I'll be giving you my thoughts and opinions on all of the units, leaders, and spells that belong to the Horde. Our first leader is Cairn Bloodhoof. His leader ability makes it to where your Horde troops have 20% increased health. He's a melee, AoE, 5-cost unit. His talents are Plains Running, where he moves 50% faster and gains the Fast trait. Aftershock, when stun expires, affected enemies are dazed for 5 seconds. Daze is a 50% slow, so the units will move slower after he stuns them. And his last ability is Reincarnation. After death, he resurrects at 30% health, but only once. So, Cairn is kind of an all-around balanced unit. He's okay. His ability is fine. 20% health feels pretty good. And I think on many other leaders it would be. But the Horde units don't seem to be great. If I had to pick a worst faction at the moment, it would probably be Horde. But that's not to say that all of the units in Horde are terrible. We'll just have to dig deep and get into that in just a little bit. His attack is a frontal cleave, or rather a shockwave, that starts at him and goes forward quite a ways. So if you are hitting something in melee and there are things walking behind what you're hitting, he will hit and stun those units as well. He's fine. He's not fantastic. He's not terrible. He's just okay. Our next leader is Grommash. He's a 4 gold cost melee unit. His leader ability is that he grants all friendly units Bloodlust. He's also a tank. His talents are Sweeping Strikes, where he gains Cleave, and then Savage Strikes, where he deals double damage to enemies below 50% health. I think Grom is pretty good. If I had to guess, he's probably the best Horde leader. There are some pretty solid builds with him, which I'll go over later in a video dedicated to Grom, or the Horde leaders in general, that we will talk about and I'll share. I think he has some pretty solid team comps that involve maybe Cheat Death and some squad units, but he's not amazing. He's not like top tier anything. He's probably in the middle of the pack of heroes as far as heroes go. So, once again, the story of the Horde hero is pretty good, but not great, and not bad, but not amazing. So let's move on to Sneed. Sneed is a 5 gold cost, AoE, tank, armored, siege damage. That's a lot of traits, that's a lot of things. His leader ability is called Sneed Before Greed. You gain 1 gold when a siege damage unit destroys a tower, captures a meeting stone, or opens a chest. His talents are Mine is Money Friend, where you gain the Miner trait, and Pillage, where you gain +1 additional gold from demolitions, but he costs 1 more gold to deploy. I think Sneed is in a weird spot. So generally, in this game, if something gives you a gold advantage, I believe that it's probably pretty good. However, Sneed is a little weird. His ability is what gives you gold advantage, and he has to be out for it to happen. He already costs 5 gold, possibly 6 if you use the Pillage talent. And he also has another condition where a siege damage unit has to be the one to destroy a tower, capture a meeting stone, or open a chest. That's pretty rough to get all of those things to happen at the same time. If you can get them to happen at the same time over the course of a match, you'll generate a lot of gold advantage, but you have to be able to get all of those things to line up. It's not fantastic to try and do, but, you know, we try. I think he's fine. I think there are some decent builds out there that can make him work. He's probably better on certain PvP maps that have more chests and more towers, and different PvE ones that have multiple towers and chests as well. But I'm sure there are maps that have 1 tower in the middle, or 1 or 2 chests that he's just not fantastic at. So he's probably very map specific, and I'm pretty sure we'll see that when the game launches. Now let's move on to units. Our first unit is Bat Rider. It's 2 gold cost, flying, AoE unit with Bombard that does elemental damage. Bombard means that they just attack ground units, so they can't attack other flying units, which is kind of unfortunate, but they have some advantages. This one leaves a fire puddle on the ground every time she drops one of her bombs that deals damage over time to things that are walking through it. Her talents are Flaming Pitch, where her Flaming Pool reduces enemies' movement speed by 30%, and Enchanted Vials, which increases the size of the Flaming Pool by 30%. I like Bat Rider. I think she's a good unit. I just have some problems with her talents. I think her talents are a little weird in the fact that they kind of just feel like they're functioning to make her work how she should work to begin with. The slow is nice, but it doesn't really feel fantastic. And the increased size is also nice, but once again, just doesn't feel fantastic. So, take that as you will. Next is our Darkspear Troll. He is a ranged, single target, 3 gold cost unit. He has a couple of talents called Big Bad Voodoo, which regenerates 10% of his health every second, which is not bad. He doesn't have a huge health pool to begin with, but it's not terrible. If it makes him survive an extra hit, then it's worth it. If it doesn't, then the talent does nothing. His second talent, called Headhunting, says on kill, increase attack and movement speed by 10%. It stacks up to 50%. That's pretty solid. You need to set it up, and it's probably better on maps that have small enemies, so he can rack up some kills. But on larger maps with big enemies, like Molten Giants and Abominations, he's probably just okay. But I think overall this is a good unit. I think it slots well into some different decks, and I think you'll probably see people playing him. Our next unit is Goblin Sappers. It's a squad, siege damage, 2 gold cost unit with Cycle. These guys don't attack enemies. Their sole purpose is to run and explode onto towers. I believe they also trigger against boss enemies. So like the objective of a map is to beat the boss at the end. They will trigger on those guys as well. Not doing the siege damage, like double damage to towers, but just whatever their normal damage is. They're very good in PvP, not great in PvE, and they're really squishy, so they're easy to stop. Like a chain lightning will just kill them. Getting hit by ranged attacks will just kill them. So they have some nuance to playing them, and if your opponent isn't ready and playing a lot of high gold cost things, they probably won't be able to react in time, and I believe one deploy of Goblin Sappers is enough to kill a tower if both of them hit, because there's 2 that deploy when you summon this unit. Their talents are Rocket Powered Turbo Boots. They move twice as fast and gain the fast trait. That's pretty solid, especially in PvP, where this will swing a game if your opponent isn't ready for them. So just doing it quicker is always nice. And you can also squeeze them in by watching what your opponent's doing. If they spend a bunch of gold and it doesn't proactively counter Goblin Sapper, then you can drop them. And with the speed boost, it's likely that they won't have the time to react before they explode on the tower. Their second tower is their second talent, rather, is Crude Gunpowder, where they burn enemies within the explosion area. Kind of good, just kind of depends. If they're only hitting towers, you're not going to get them to explode in specific spots, only around the towers, so that could be good, and it could just literally do nothing. Next we have Ogre Mage. He's a ranged AoE 5 cost unit that deals elemental damage and bloodlusts nearby allies. I don't believe it's all of your allies like Grom. I believe he selects something and casts bloodlust on it. His talents are Frostfire Bolt, where he gains the Frost trait, which slows enemies' movement and attack speed, and Ignite, where he burns enemy targets. I believe burn is just a flat amount of damage over time. This guy is okay. In my previous video, I was talking about how I don't think there's a very good case for 5 and 6 cost units currently. I think this guy's just fine. You might play him in some things. He's better than most of the 5 and 6 cost units, I think, but he's not fantastic. I personally don't think I will ever run him in a deck, but I would love the opportunity to test him and try it out. And maybe you can try it for yourself and find out what you like about him. But I currently don't have any plans to use him, so maybe that'll change. Next is Frostwolf Shaman. It's a 1 target, ranged, 4 cost unit that deals elemental damage, and it heals nearby friendly units. This is the first unit that's not a spell that heals things. It's not terrible. She doesn't heal a lot, and she doesn't do a lot of damage. She does a little of both. In other games, like card games, for example, like Magic or Flesh and Blood, you don't really ever want something that does 2 things halfway. Generally, you want things that do 1 thing very well. This unit can kind of feel underwhelming sometimes, but it also feels like it fits into some certain comps because of her talents. Her first talent is Earth Shield, where she permanently grants armor to a nearby ally. The ability only has 1 charge, so she can only give it to 1 unit. So you have to position her to make sure that she is giving it to the correct thing. If you summon a bunch of vultures and a Tyrian, if you summon her, you need to make sure that she's closer to the Tyrian so that she doesn't Earth Shield a random vulture that has no health. And her second talent is Chain Lightning, where her ranged attacks chain to 3 nearby targets. This makes her a little better of a DPS. The Earth Shield makes her a little better of a healer or a supporter. But for 4 gold, that may not be enough to make her viable. We'll have to wait and see when beta comes out. I think this is probably a unit that you'll have to watch and see how people use her. But personally, I think she's just kind of okay, which is kind of the story for Horde units, sadly. Our next unit is Stonehoof Tauren. It is a melee, single target tank with charge. Charge just means that when this unit gets in range of an enemy, for her charge ability, she will charge at them, like the ability in World of Warcraft. She dashes to them, and she deals damage to them. Their talents are Pummel. After connecting a charge, stun the target for 3 seconds. That's not bad. That's pretty good, especially against larger enemies. And then Momentum, after connecting a charge, immediately change a second time if possible. Sorry, charge a second time if possible. Both of these talents are pretty solid. This is a pretty solid tank for 4 gold, has a lot of health, does a good amount of damage. I think the charge ability is really nice, and I think it can very quickly kill some of the squishier units in the game. So most ranged units will get a couple hits on tanks before they get in range, but because of the Stonehoof Tauren's charge, they don't get that opportunity, and Stonehoof Tauren does a good amount of damage, so they can kill the ranged units before they actually get the chance to damage her. I think she's probably pretty good. I don't think she's the best tank in the game, but she's a good unit. Our next unit is our Warsong Grunts. They're a squad melee 5-cost unit that has Fury, where their attack speed increases while in combat, and they are also a tank. They're not great. They're like the counterpart to the Alliance Footmen. I don't really see that being great. It's a lot of gold and not a lot of what they're doing. Their talents are Blood Pact. When one grunt dies, the other gains Bloodlust. They just don't do a lot of damage to begin with, I don't think. So Bloodlust doesn't really help with that. And then Guard Duty is they remain at deploy locations until entering combat. I don't know how good that is. Because you're spending 5 gold to just set them and do nothing until something gets there. And if that's the game you're trying to play, there are probably better units to do that, like the Drake and I think it's called the Tower Guard talent, where it just sits at a tower. Drakes are pretty solid. We'll talk about them in the Blackrock family overview. But as far as Warsong Grunts go, not my favorite unit. I don't even think they're good. I just think they're kind of meh. Okay, our next unit is the Warsong Raider. It's a 4 gold, single target, melee, tank, fast, siege damage. That's a lot of keywords. Talents are Saboteur. Attacking a tower cripples it, reducing its damage dealt by 50% for 3 seconds. That's pretty solid. And then Demolitionist is become a siege unit, ignoring troops. So she'll just run past them and become a tower breaker. I think this is probably a pretty good unit. I've seen a couple people play with her, but not a lot. So it's hard to have a lot of accurate data on this unit. But I do think that this unit is strong. I think the Saboteur talent is super solid, and she will probably have use in different decks, maybe even Sneed. That would be kind of good. So I think she's probably a unit you will see a lot at the beginning of the game. Our next unit is actually a spell. It's Chain Lightning. This is one of the starting units in the game that you get automatically. It costs 2 gold. It's AoE. It's Cycle. It's Elemental. I think this unit is very good. Its talents are Brilliant Flash. On deploy, you stun enemies within for 1 second. That's fine. It's not terrible. 1 second stun is pretty good, especially if you're using it right as your push gets to the enemy group. Then you have Storm's Reach, which dramatically increases the jump distance between targets. I think that's pretty solid talent as well. Having a bigger range on your Chain Lightning is fantastic. A lot of players are kind of not very high on this talent currently. I think it's probably one of the better spells in the game. It kills harpies, which a lot of people think are OP because they can mine gold for you. It kills Goblin Sappers. It can be a 1 second stun when you need it that supplies a little bit of damage. I think there are a lot of uses for this in PvP. I don't think it's probably the strongest thing in PvE. There are probably better things you can do with your 2 gold, but in PvP, when everyone thinks that harpies are the best thing since sliced bread, I think that this will be a very good include in a lot of different decks. Our final spell is Execute. It's a 3 gold AoE spell. It doesn't deal elemental damage, it deals a percent of damage. I don't know that 50% is the right amount of damage it does. I think it depends on the armor and the level difference of the unit. So I can't give you a solid number on what it actually does. It does good damage though. Let me tell you that. Its talents are Bloodthirsty, where you bloodlust allies within the spell area for 10 seconds, and Killing Spree. If an enemy is killed, the next Horde unit costs 1 less. I don't think Killing Spree is very good. If Horde units were better, I think Killing Spree would be solid, but there are not a lot of great Horde units right now. Maybe pairing it with like Goblin Sappers or Darkspear Troll or something like that may help. Maybe even the Stonehoof Tauren. I think we'll see it in some areas. I just think the Bloodthirsty talent is much better. There's a Jaina build currently that does a bunch of unbound spam at the enemy base and then executes the base, bloodlusting all your things, and Jaina pumping 3 extra spell levels on top of the execute is pretty solid. It makes it do a lot of damage. I think that build is pretty great. It'll probably be one of the best PvP builds in the game, unless they find a way to fix some of the unbound shenanigans that are happening currently, or you're playing against a very good player. I think it has some counterplay to it, but it's basically your like mono red aggro. If you have any familiarity with MTG terms, you're just gonna try and kill the base as fast as possible, and sometimes you do in a matter of 15 seconds, and sometimes you don't, and then it becomes a struggle to claw back into the game sometimes. But overall, a great spell, one of the better ones for what it does. Their entire deck's built around it, so you know it's good. Thanks for watching the Horde family overview. Do you agree with my opinions on the units? Disagree? Let me know in the comments below. Tune in next week for the Undead family overview, but until next time, later.